And on that note, I do like to respond positively to the requests that you lot send me. And if there is one current story I receive the most requests to cover, it is that of former British nurse Lucy Letby, who was convicted of murdering 7 babies in the neonatal unit she worked at in a hospital in Chester, England. Now, many people, I've literally never received an email telling me that Lucy Letby is guilty, but I have received many telling me that she is innocent. Now, as I say, many people believe that Letby was the scapegoat for others' incompetence and problems at the hospital. And I just want to read you a brief example. This is from John. John sent this to me in October 2023. Good morning to you, John. He said, "Hi, Sonia. No murders or attacks happened. The cause of baby deaths was virus infection from the leaking sewage pipe, sepsis, small cramped unit with cots close together, which caused infection to easily spread, medical negligence by the gang of 4 who were incompetent junior doctors at the time, poor care, understaffing on an unsafe and chaotic unit." Now, I have to say, John is absolutely representative of a lot of the emails and messages I receive about Lucy Letby. So here I am responding to your request, and I want to welcome my guests to discuss the case and so much more. She is the darling, Christina Doucher. Good morning, Christina, although I know it's some scene time where you are.
Good almost morning, Sonia.
Wonderful.
It isn't scene time, but we soldier on.
We absolutely do. Christina is a Sunday Times best-selling author of Vox and Q and amongst other acclaimed books. And her latest book, The Sentence, is about to be published by HarperCollins. And you know, you said to me, and so then I started to look more into The Sentence, and I realized that the similarities to what we're dealing with the Lucy Letby case cannot be ignored. Christina, talk to us about what you saw as some similarities.
They can't be ignored. So first of all, I'm based in the US. I have dual citizenship. I'm very aware of what's going on in the UK news. I followed the Letby case. I am confident that if Letby had been tried here in the US and found guilty, she would be on death row right now. There are not many women on death row. They're usually there for, killing their kids for insurance purposes and other heinous crimes. You have to be a bad girl to get the death penalty here in the States, but it does happen. So when I think about someone on death row, I think I have a visceral reaction. Now, honestly, of course, I have a visceral reaction to the crimes as well as anybody would with, you kill a baby, and that's terrible. It's unthinkable. I can't even fathom the kind of mindset that would engage in that. But then I think about justice, and what's important to hear is not trying to find someone, it's trying to find the right person and making, if I may use this word, dead sure that we know we've got the right person. Because on the one hand, in the UK, I mean, Lucy Letby has an unusual sentence. It's called a whole life sentence, several whole life sentences, I believe, and which means that she will never leave prison.
That's right. 14 whole life orders she has. And
exactly.
Obviously she's just mounted a fresh bid, an appeal to appeal her convictions. And but yeah, 14 whole life orders. Go on,
that's
Christina.
A very long time for a 34-year-old girl. It is, unfortunately, if in countries that have the death penalty, the time is much shorter, and of course the consequences are irreparable. So if we turn our attention, for instance, and I'm not voting for whether Letby is guilty or innocent. I don't know.
Right.
I was on the jury. I did not follow the trial. That's not the issue here. The issue is that we must be certain. And here's an interesting case from 2003 in the Netherlands. There's a woman named Lucia de Burk, who coincidentally was also a pediatric nurse and charged with at first 4 murders and 3 attempted. And I think during the trial, the numbers went up slightly. She was given a life sentence, And that was back in 2003. She was finally exonerated in 2010. If the deaths were ruled of natural causes. Now, again, if this woman had been in the US, she might very well have found herself on death row. So I find this quite fascinating. Another thing I find fascinating about the UK population is that, having lived there and having lots of friends there, I am well aware that you don't have the death penalty anymore. That doesn't translate into nobody wants the death penalty. So if you look at the comments in the Telegraph, for instance, that during the Letby trial, or if you look at the comments in the Mail, just as of last week, when the news broke about her appeals and these sort of last ditch efforts, what you find is a whole lot of comments from Brits who say, let her swing. And this is fascinating to me, because what is the collateral that people are willing to put on the table,
right,
to let that happen? If you're so damned, pardon me, sure, then what do you do? How can you guarantee, but what guarantee do you have? And so my book, The Sentence, imagines a very, very bad murder. Once again, the murder of a child, a man who looks guilty from top to bottom, a prosecutor who doesn't want to ask for the death penalty but does, and a law that forces said prosecutor to put her own life on the line if this man that she sends to death row is ever found innocent. So I have this is on my mind quite a bit. And I think whenever I hear that, let her swing, or hang her, or she deserves the chamber or the chair, I have to ask one question, and that is, how sure are you?
And it's a really important question, because the last woman hanged in Britain was Ruth Ellis, and Ruth
Yes,
Ellis,
I made the movie, Dance with a Stranger.
absolutely terrible, horrendous story. And arguably, Ruth Ellis was so emotionally destroyed in so many respects. She'd lost the baby she was carrying. Her boyfriend was, well, not really her boyfriend. He was just kind of using her, and she ended up shooting him. And I'm not justifying her shooting him whatsoever, but with what we know now about psychology and emotions, the chances are, if she was in a different era, she would have had a completely different outcome, wouldn't she? But as you say, the point about the sentence and the point about Lucy Letby is, let her swing, but we can't take that back. If in the event of the story that you're talking about, we then find other information and evidence to prove that that person is innocent, it's done, it's over. There is no going back from that.
That's absolutely it. And in fact, it was, oh my goodness, Anthony Amsterdam, when he was arguing before the Supreme Court on a case some years ago, and he's got a really famous quote, death is different, right? Death is permanent. Death is irreversible. So if we're going to talk about having the death penalty, and there are other discussions as well. There's the sense of closure for families, the sense of justice. There's the age-old economic argument, which is, why should we pay for these people to sit in jail? It actually costs much more in the US to hold a person on death row and deal with all of the appeals and whatnot. It costs much more than to actually house that person for life, which is contrary to intuition, I think, but it is a surprising sort of a number. And here's another thing that I found interesting. I ran a Twitter poll, because as a former scientist, I figured Twitter polls are really the be all and end all. But I did get almost 1,000 votes, and I split it up between 4 ways. The UK and US, and then within each set, the choices were completely against the death penalty, or it depends. What I found was that in the UK actually had about 750 or so respondents, and it was 65-35, 65 totally against, 35 percent it depends, which is also fascinating, I think, because in light of the let her swing arguments, it is not the case that a book about the death penalty doesn't have a potential audience in the United Kingdom.
Right.
The laws don't reflect necessarily the views of the people. So I
Right.
think it's highly relevant, and I do hope people read it. But I also hope that before we continue to say let her swing, we think a little bit harder and really ask, how sure are we before we send someone away for life, or worse, send someone to a place from which there's no coming back ever.
Absolutely. I'm going to continue to do more deep dives on Lucy Letby just because there's so much information surrounding her. But I think that as a general conversation, it's really important because we have to ask ourselves, what sort of society do we want to be? Do we want to be a punishing society? Do we want to be an eye for an eye society? I was always opposed to the death penalty, Christina, until I encountered such characters as Levi Belfield, who murdered Millie Dowler, Amélie de Lagrange, and there was no doubt whatsoever that he was responsible. And suddenly I found myself saying, let him die. I'd pull the switch myself, which was completely contrary to who I've been my entire life. And I don't know whether that's age or we're just so tired of rotten people doing rotten things.
Well, we grow up, we change, we see more things. We do see that miscarriages of justice happen, as in the Lucia de Burke case. There was also a rapist, I believe, or an alleged rapist in the UK some years ago. I don't remember the name. Um, and and if I can sort of close with anything, it's this. My dear father used, when I was writing this book, and he was very much for capital punishment because he believed that it was justice. His response to me was always, well, you'd change your mind if it were your kid who were the victim.
This is the
And
thing.
my response to him was, and you might change your mind if it were your kid who were the accused.
We've got some brilliant comments coming in here. Hope and Love and Peace said, my granny went to the protest to try to stop them hanging Ruth Ellis. I mean, that would have been a dire time. Awful, absolutely horrendous. That's a really good point you've just raised there. My brother always says it's not happening until it's happening to you. So it's really easy, isn't it? And that applies to everything. It's really easy for us to say, oh yeah, just kill that person because we have no attachment to them. But you're absolutely right. What if it is your kid that is accused? Wouldn't you have a completely different take? Wouldn't you want every area of the law exhausted? Thoroughly exhausted. And with the Lucy Letby case, there are so many loose ends around the whole story. And it is highly questionable. I can see why people are disturbed and so many have contacted me about it because it's not straightforward. And the gut instinct says something's wrong, right?
It's not. I mean, there are a couple of things. One, I learned recently listening to, I think, Peter Hitchens, say what you want about him, but hey, he was talking on the subject. I learned recently that it's very difficult, apparently, to find expert witnesses who will come up and stand and testify for the defense in a case like this. So the only expert witness that Letby had at her trial was, in fact, the plumber, who was the one who was talking about the problems with the infection
sewage
and the sewage and so on. And then the other thing that happened was that there's an excellent article by Dr. David Livermore, who's a medical microbiologist, I think, at a university in the UK, and he wrote on the Daily Skeptic. He's got quite a good outline of some of the statistical anomalies and some interesting kind of fresh parsings of the famous Green Letter. So
I will look out for that. I'm going to I'm going to have to stop you there, which I hate having to do.
I know.
Everybody, this has been the formidable Christina Dalcher. Please check out her book coming in March, The Sentence. It will be, I can guarantee you, as brilliant as she is. This has been Friday's edition of the Sonia Poulton Show on today's News Talk.